With its ninth expansion on its way, Aeon's End can be a daunting franchise to get into. I'm Omfan, a veteran Aeon's End player. I've played the game consistently for almost 6 years, and I played all expansions of Aeon's End at least once. In general, I would simply advise new players to start out with whatever is available to them, and modify the content to fit you and your group, especially when it comes to complexity, and just remove the stuff that is taking away from your enjoyment of the game. If you happen to be at your local game store, you're looking online, or you're considering backing the current campaign, which would be Beyond the Breach as of current, and you're thinking about, okay, where should I start? Which is a good point to get introduced to this franchise for me. I have a few suggestions for you. In my experience, both Aeon's End, the core set, and New Age are both fantastic places to get started, as they teach you the fundamentals of Aeon's End with some good and down-to-earth major supplies and nemesis, though New Age is slightly more complex than the first Aeon's End. The biggest distinction between these two come from their focus on standalone battles in Aeon's End, while New Age introduces the expedition format, stringing together multiple battles and adding more rules and a higher tempo for each succeeding game. Whichever experience you prefer is up to you and your group, both amazing places to get started. War Eternal is not necessarily a bad place to get started either. It is slightly more complex than the first Aeon's End, but not by much more. But where it differs is its focus on much harder nemesis, a much more oppressive experience, and harder basic nemesis cards with more random factors. This also means that it's not necessarily a beginner-friendly experience, but there certainly are a demographic who prefers this kind of game. Coming up, we have probably the least complex starting point for an Aeon's End experience, with Legacy. It starts you from more or less ground zero and continues to build on the rules as you progress through the campaign. That of course does not mean it stays at low complexity. And it's also an odd one out, which is why I haven't mentioned it as the first game to suggest for new players, because it's a build your own mage experience, which can be a bit hit or miss, and also means that you sort of are forced into just figuring out the game as you go on, which can be a very good experience, but also might not be an easy one to sit with all these choices that you have to make. And also why, another big reason why I'm not mentioning it as a part of the first three is because it has the least variety when it comes to mages once you're done with the campaign, which means it has very low replayability, and also kind of forces you to combine it with another wave or another box of content of Aeon's End, which might not be desirable if you're still figuring out if you like to play Aeon's End and if you need or want more content. Moving on to some of the additions that adds a little bit more complexity to Aeon's End, and I would have more concerns with suggesting for new players, we have The Descent. The Descent is not necessarily a bad place to get started with Aeon's End by any means, but due to the new friends and foe mechanic, there is a lot more content to get used to, and also struggling to learn the fundamentals of Aeon's End with a new mechanic on top. So my suggestion here is just don't start with playing with the friends and foes, or at least not with the foe mechanic, and just get comfortable with the fundamental gameplay of Aeon's End before adding in the friends and foes as you go on. Still, even without the friends and foes, this box is still on the more complex side of things. Moving down the list, we're getting to some expansions I would not recommend for new players under most circumstances. The first of these are Outcasts, which introduces the curse mechanic, which are negative cards that are forced into the player's decks and forces them to deal with them, and thereby obstructing their original game plan, which can feel very oppressive and disorientating for new players. That, alongside brutal basic nemesis cards and nemesis in general, means that I have to say that Outcasts are not a good place to start for most beginning players. though if you are into this sort of experience, go ahead. All these factors also means that I would highly recommend it for returning players, as it forces you to deal with the game in a very different way, and also to clean up your gameplay and just hone in on good fundamental Aeon's End. Moving on to the big bucks, we're getting to Legacy of Gravehold, which I would only recommend for new players under very, very narrow circumstances. It's a long campaign of individual games strung into a longer narrative, which is great, but also means there is a lot of upkeep, there's a lot of new things to get into and understand and comprehend during and in between the games, which can be very, very overwhelming for most players, new players, and even some more routine players. That, alongside a number of new mechanics, which adds to the already expanding level of complexity that is internal to Aeon's End, means I have to say I do not recommend Aeon's End Legacy of Gravehold for any new players, unless you are very prepared for this type of experience. And last but definitely not least, though for sure when it comes to a good starting point for new players, we have Past and Future. This one is simply impossible to play without a previous box that also features the Expedition mode. Of course, if you're considering backing Beyond the Breach, which features the Expedition mode, this will not be your primary concern. Even with this, Past and Future includes a lot of new mechanics which can take a lot of time to get used to and familiarize yourself with, beyond just the fundamental gameplay, which I suspect for new players would be too much to get into without any prior experience with Aeon's End, which is why I would not recommend new players to pick up Past and Future, or even to add it on as your second game while backing the current campaign Beyond the Breach. And this kind of leads us to the final question of this video. Should you, as a new player without any prior experience with Aeon's End, consider backing Beyond the Breach? Which is a very difficult question to answer for me, because I don't know you. I will say that Beyond the Breach leads on the more complex side of things. It continues with friends and foes, it continues on the expedition mode, and it includes a lot of new mages that has a higher complexity level than most previous waves. Though Legacy of Gravehold and Past and Future probably keeps up with this pretty well. As someone who has playtested Beyond the Breach, I do believe it's coming up to be quite a good expansion on the Aeon's End franchise. But I would recommend new players to slim down the content that they are dealing with out of the gate, especially when it comes to friends and foes. Simply take out the content that you believe is adding too much complexity for you to enjoy the game, and just take it from there. Look into the promotional material, look at gameplay videos online, or whatever content review you can get off Beyond the Breach, and consider if this is something for you. If you are seriously considering backing Beyond the Breach and thinking maybe you should add on another box of Aeon's End, I would say to hold back. Too much is too much, and it can be easy to overbuy on a board game that you're still not sure on is for you. Check up on if you can buy cheap second-hand editions of the game nearby or in your local game store, and don't overbuy on a game you still haven't played yet. If you believe you're better off starting off with a more basic or less complex edition of Aeon's End, consider my suggestions in this video, or ask around on a Discord server or Facebook group and just take it from there. In summary, I would recommend either the first Aeon's End or New Age for new players. War Eternal if you're into a more oppressive experience of Aeon's End with harder nemesis. Legacy if you want an experience that eases you into the rules of the game, but are also willing to get another big box of Aeon's End once you're done with the campaign. The Descent if you want quite a bit more complexity and or are willing to hold on some of the mechanics within the box. I would not recommend Outcasts for most new players, though it works great as a second box, and I would not recommend neither Legacy of Gravehold nor Past and Future for any new players without any prior experience, though Legacy of Gravehold only if you're into Gloomhaven style games with a lot of setup and upkeep. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this useful or if you have any further questions, please add them in the comments. Or if you're a returning player and you have some further suggestions or specifications, or you want to help out other new players with anything, just let them know in the comments, and thank you.